Japan is aging so fast it's turning to India for skilled workers, from engineers and caregivers to truck drivers and hospitality personnel. India may be sitting on something the world is going to need a lot more of: talent. So, why is this happening? And could India's people become a much bigger source of economic and strategic power? Let's start with Japan, because that is where what is happening gives a glimpse of a much bigger shift. Japan has one of the oldest populations in the world. Its working age population is shrinking, and there simply aren't enough people to do all the jobs the country needs. The shortage has become serious enough for Japan to look at automation and humanoid robots for caregiving. But robots can only do so much. Japan still needs people. That's where India comes in. Under the India-Japan Human Resource Exchange Action Plan, the two countries are looking at more than 5 lakh personnel exchanges over 5 years. And within that, the plan includes 50,000 skilled Indian personnel and potential talent going to Japan. And there is another important part of this India-Japan story unfolding right now. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is in Japan leading a 200-member Indian business delegation, pitching India to Japanese companies and investors. The pitch isn't just about Indian workers going to Japan. India wants Japanese capital, technology and companies to come here. Japan has set a target of 10 trillion yen, that's around 60,000 crore rupees, in investment in India over the next decade. But India's pitch goes beyond investment. Goyal is putting India's demographic advantage at the center of this relationship. India has a median age of 28.4, while more than 30% of Japan's population is 65 or older. The larger ambition is to build a highly skilled, culturally adaptable workforce for Japanese companies while making India a base for Japanese businesses looking beyond India to the wider global south. So the equation is bigger than jobs. Japan brings capital and technology. India brings youth, skills, scale and a huge market. And that is where India's leverage begins. India can offer Japan something it urgently needs: a large, young and increasingly skilled workforce. And it isn't only engineers or technology professionals. Japan needs people across a range of sectors. Take a look at Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs' website and the categories of skilled workers they need. There's a diverse range: nursing care, building management, shipbuilding and airport ground handling, as well as truck drivers, restaurant workers and car maintenance personnel, just to name a few. The reason is clear enough: as the population gets older, there are fewer people available to do the work the economy still needs. India is beginning to build a pipeline for that demand. The Skill Development Ministry has been talking to Japanese government representatives, companies and recruiters about preparing Indians for these jobs. Language is part of that preparation, because if you want to work in Japan, knowing Japanese is quite important. Take the case of Assam. The state is training thousands of young people in Japanese to improve their employment opportunities in Japan and with Japanese companies operating in Assam. Think about what that means. A young person in Assam is learning the language of a country thousands of kilometers away because there is a job market waiting for them there. And the demand isn't theoretical. Border Plus, an Indian workforce mobility company, says it wants to send up to 50,000 Indian caregivers to Japan over the next 4 to 5 years. That's a private company's target, not a Japanese government quota, but it gives you an indication of the market that is developing. Japan needs people to look after an aging population. India has a large young workforce. These two realities are beginning to fit together. Japan, though, may only be the most visible example. Across much of the developed world, populations are getting older and workforces are getting smaller. At the same time, economies still need people with particular skills. Look at Europe. More Indian students are considering countries such as Germany, France and Portugal rather than automatically looking to the United States. Fees and immigration rules obviously matter. Europe also has another attraction: it needs workers. Several European countries are dealing with labour shortages and are looking outside their own borders to fill them. India is an obvious place to look. Britain is trying to attract highly skilled researchers and scientists. Australia wants skilled migrants. The UAE has spent years positioning itself as a destination for professionals. Their economies and their needs are different, but they are all looking for people with skills they don't have enough of at home. And those skills are changing too. Countries are looking for people in artificial intelligence, technology, engineering and healthcare. So the demand for Indian talent is not limited to traditional migrant jobs. Then there is America. The US is tightening immigration, as we know, and for many Indians, the rules around staying and building a permanent life there are becoming more uncertain. Some Indian professionals may even find themselves having to leave. That could be a loss for America, but it doesn't mean the world has stopped needing Indian professionals. Japan, Europe, Australia and the Gulf are all looking for talent, and that gives Indian workers more options than they had before. America may still be the preferred destination for many, but it isn't the only destination anymore. And there is another possibility that's becoming increasingly important: staying in India and working for the world from here. Global companies are putting more high-value work in India. Take Charles Schwab. Reuters reported that the US financial services company plans to expand its India workforce to around 2,000 people by the end of 2027. Its Hyderabad operation will work on technology, engineering and operations for the American business. For an Indian professional, that changes the equation. You can increasingly work on global products for a global company without necessarily moving permanently to another country. The old choice was often to stay in India or go abroad. That's becoming less clear-cut. And that brings us to the larger story. India has around 18.5 million people living overseas, the world's largest overseas migrant population. We usually talk about that diaspora through remittances, successful Indian origin CEOs, politicians or students. But there's something underneath all of that: skills. The Indian diaspora carries professional experience, expertise and networks across dozens of countries. And countries are now looking for more Indian workers to add to that pool. India, meanwhile, is trying to prepare for that demand. The government has identified 25 priority countries where there are labour shortages, and that government is also developing programs to prepare Indians for overseas employment. That includes language training, certification and matching Indian skills to the requirements of particular countries. So the conversation is changing. For years, the question was essentially how many Indians can go abroad. Now there is another question: what skills does the world need and how can we prepare people for those jobs? For decades, India educated people. Other countries employed them. And there was a concern that India was losing some of its brightest young professionals. But demographics are changing that picture. A young and increasingly skilled Indian workforce suddenly has something that developed countries with shrinking working age populations need. That is an opportunity for India if it can train enough people to meet that demand. For Indian professionals, the balance may be changing. For years, Indians competed to get into the world's richest countries. Increasingly, those countries may have to compete for the Indians they need. If an Indian nurse or technology professional has more countries to choose from, their negotiating position changes. They can ask where the opportunity is best, where the pay is better, where the immigration rules are more predictable, and whether they even need to leave India to build a global career. And if India can train enough people and build an economy that gives them good opportunities at home, that talent can become an economic advantage and potentially a source of diplomatic and strategic leverage. India has spent decades exporting goods, services and software. Now the world is coming for something else. India's got talent. Who gets it? This is Beyond Borders. I'm Ananya Dasgupta.
Subscribe now